Welcome to the Therapist Thrival Guide. My name is Miranda Barker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am here with my co-host, Dr. Lucas Volini.
Hello.
LMFT.
LMFT.
Yeah, licensed marriage family therapist. And today we are talking about infant loss and miscarriage. And so if this is a difficult topic for you, we totally understand if this is not your episode. But we share so much good information throughout this whole episode that we hope that you'll join, but wanted to give you that quick little warning before we jump in. Today we are continuing our conversation around Maternal Mental Health Month. And so we wanted to have Laura on. Laura, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Laura Lammar-Binder. I have been with Ellie for going on 4 years now in August. I am a pre-licensed clinical, supervisee, that's what it's called, going for my LMFT.
Okay, awesome. So, and before we started recording, we were just talking about how you started out in the community-based program and you have transitioned to in-office. Tell us a little bit about what is community-based? How has that transition been?
Yeah, the transition, so the community-based was going into people's homes. COVID kind of threw a wrench in that, and we went telehealth for a long time. And so I had quite a few people who stayed telehealth and just a handful of other people who, when we could return back to the community, we were insistent on, you need to come back to my home. So what I like about telehealth is that when I transitioned to in-office, I was able to take quite a large chunk of people with me because we were already doing telehealth. And that we could go, we have this option for you to stay. Otherwise, it used to be, I'm going into office. I have to give everybody to someone else. And then some people would have some extreme anxiety and abandonment issues.
It's hard to switch therapists, yeah.
Especially in community-based, so much turnover with therapists.
Agreed, yeah. Yep.
So what kind of is what's your favorite topic to talk about? What's your favorite demographic to work with?
Maternal mental health, definitely.
I led you right in there.
Right in there, yep. I work a lot with depression and anxiety, but the fun thing about maternal mental health is that a lot of them have depression and anxiety. And so when you have someone coming in for those things, it's maternal mental health stuff, tell me more.
Yeah. So how did you get started in this topic? What drew you to it?
Good question. I always thought that I would just be working with kids. I always loved kids, wanting to help parents be better parents, for lack of a better way to put it, and just helping kids because I always felt misunderstood as a kid. But then I went on my journey of trying to become a mother with my husband. We had been married for almost 7 years by the time we finally decided that we were ready to start and get things going. And then we had complications along the way, and now we have 2 beautiful girls, but getting there was fun. And even after having them, it was even more fun, and just not just whole real life, but in mental health, period.
Okay. So you're coming to this podcast with so much rich real life experiences that have kind of fueled your passion for this.
Yes, very much so.
Do you want to dive into it? Let's jump in.
Yeah, where do you want me to start?
So, let's start at, you talked about the journey to becoming a parent, and I know a little bit of your story, and I know that you're open to sharing some of that on the podcast as well. Do you want to just jump in there?
Sure, yeah. Okay. So like I said, my husband and I had been married for 6-7-ish years by the time we decided to start, so we were already going on 30, and so there's lots of stigma there about, can't wait too long, the biological time clock, But I had always known that I was meant to be a mom. Not just that I wanted to be a mom, that my maternal instinct was there and I was meant to be a mom. And so by the time we started, everyone in my family there were no infertility issues we'd ever heard of. My grandmother's favorite way to put it is we were a bunch of fertile myrtles. And, I had a lot of pressure. And a lot of hope going into that, I'll go off birth control. We're going to start. I'll be pregnant in 3 months tops. 3 months goes by, nothing. 4 months goes by, nothing. I think the first time took us 6 months-ish, which in the long run is a very short period of time. But when you're in the midst of it, it feels like eternity. And every month you're just depressed and you go through it all over again every single month. We get pregnant, and it was The excitement was there. Everything was wonderful. We had all the pre-planning, everything. And then one day in December, I started bleeding, and we go into the doctor's office and had, we kind of figured out what was happening, but we were there for hours before someone finally came and said, "We're sorry for your loss."
Wow.
And it was just so detrimental isn't quite the word I'm looking for. But
Devastating.
There you go. Yes, it was devastating. It was devastating. And it was, I think the thing that stuck out to me most was that my husband in particular was very, the idea of having children was very daunting for him, and he was still processing that, oh gosh, I'm going to be a dad in 9 months. And then we lost it, and he's like, I didn't realize how badly I wanted it until it was gone.
Oh,
Yeah.
that breaks my heart.
Yeah.
How far along were you?
I was only 7.5 weeks. So
but
it was
still
super early, but it was enough for us to be attached.
Yeah.
We were going to have a baby. We were going to be parents. It was going to be this wonderful, magical thing. And then it wasn't.
I mean, my heart just breaks for you in that moment. And I think it's so important for us to talk about infant loss and miscarriage and the grief and loss that can come with it, because it's part of destigmatizing mental health. It's part about destigmatizing maternal mental health, as well as just there's an enormous amount of what's the word I'm looking for? Just like, I don't know if it's peace, but just like support that can come from talking to other people that have experienced this. And so I think that that's my hope for this podcast, is that we can talk about your experiences and how it affected your mental health, and then how you are supporting and helping your clients through similar situations.
Definitely. I'd love that.
So then how did you cope in those early days when this happened?
Which is a different story from when we lost our second child. So good question.
Okay, yeah.
In the early days after losing our first child, we went straight to our family, and everyone was just surrounded us. And emotionally, we lived in Hawaii at the time, and all of our family was here in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And so they couldn't physically be there for us, but they did their very best. Like you could feel the intent was to wrap their arms around us, and it was so supportive and wonderful, and it was the best that I could have hoped for.
What did they do that was so helpful?
They were just willing to talk. They were willing to let me cry. They were willing to let me be there. They were willing to check in on me and make sure that things were going well, or as well as they could be, given the circumstances. They asked about my health. They asked how Jeremy was doing. It was my husband. They were asking all the right questions, I guess, would be the thing.
They acknowledged the loss for what it was.
Yes. They knew how badly I wanted to be a mom, and they knew how badly, or like how passionate I already was, and how invested I was in the idea of having this child. And everyone was so happy for it. Again, we'd been married for 7 years. And we dated for 5 years before that. So we were together for a very long time.
Yeah.
And people had been waiting for the news, right? And then it was gone. And so...
I'm curious, two-part question. Did you tell people about the pregnancy before the miscarriage? And then or was the conversation you were having with a lot of your support people kind of both of those in one? Like where it's like, hey guys, was pregnant, experienced a miscarriage. Like, I'm just curious if a lot of them knew ahead of time.
Yes. We announced to the world because we were over the moon. And we had people warning us along the way. They're like, it's really early to be announcing. Like, you should be waiting until you're in your second trimester, specifically for, and that's a topic I would love to talk about today, period, is that it was taboo. They're like, because infant loss is so common, it's like 1 in 4 pregnancies, infant loss, statistically speaking. And you should really wait till your second trimester because the chances of losing a child in your second trimester are exponentially lower than your chances of losing during the first. And so I had so many people commenting like, oh, you really should have waited to tell people. You're going to jinx yourself. So then, of course, you have those kind of emotions there too. Like, well, I guess I jinxed myself, huh?
Oh.
Which is not a way to live either. And But everybody, again, they also consider the first pregnancy loss as kind of a fluke, is kind of how they kind of treated it like, oh, well, you can try again. Well, you can try again, and we planned to. It was great. We somehow got pregnant 2 months later, which is way reduced timeline than the first time we were trying. And so that one, I had a feeling. I was like, I can't be excited about this one. I don't know.
Did you feel like, though, like you wouldn't let yourself be excited? Like
Very much
that
so.
guardedness, I would
Yes.
imagine, would be hard.
Very much so. I was very guarded, and I was very, like, I've felt this hope before. I don't want to go there again. I'm going to wait on this one. I told, of course, my husband, and I told very close-knit friends and family, like, hey, I'm pregnant again. Oh, congratulations, congratulations. And I always had this feeling of like,
Did you feel like you were still grieving the first loss?
most definitely. Most definitely. And that was very much part of the whole, like, I'm not going to hope yet. And 2 days later, after we found out, I started losing the second one. And this time we were only about 3.5. I found out super early. Pregnancy tests and things are crazy nowadays, super early. And go into my OBGYN. I was sharing this earlier about how some people probably have very well-meaning intentions, and they turn out to be crazy invalidating depending on the person you are. So going into the OBGYN and them confirming that I was losing the pregnancy, he literally told me, he's like, well, you're so early that this is considered a chemical pregnancy. So you don't have to think of it as a baby if you don't want to. And that, I became irrationally angry. Irrationally angry hearing that. And
Why
feeling
irrationally?
Good question. I felt like I couldn't tell him how angry I was because I probably would have wanted to punch him.
Well, it's absurd to deliver that as a choice.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, call it a chemical pregnancy or not. Don't say you get to decide whether or not this was a baby that you lost.
Yeah. Yeah,
How can you do that?
exactly. It was rough. It was a
Yeah.
rough one. Yeah. And I changed a lot after that one. I've always been a super bubbly person, probably a little immature. And that's just been, I've always leaned into that because I've dealt with a death since a very young age. We lost our mother when I was very young. And my relationship with death has always been like, I've always thought of it like, you know, that relative, you go to a family gathering and there's that relative, you're like, oh man, they're here. Hi, how's it going? So death has kind of always been that entity in my life where you're like, I don't want to see you, but I know you exist. This is great.
Well, and it has been present in a lot of your life.
Exactly. A lot of my, just child development period and then developing into a woman and a wife, mother, all of it has very much been associated with just the idea of mortality. My husband was in the military and he was sent to Afghanistan back in 2010, 2011.
That's why you lived in Hawaii.
That came much later. That's a whole other story. But I stayed in Wisconsin at the time while he went overseas, and we got married very quickly because he wasn't going to leave me with nothing in case something happened to him. But we did have to sit down and basically plan his funeral and what his expectations were and what his hopes were for all the
As a newlywed.
As a newlywed, yes. We got married and he left 3 months later.
Wow.
So those are difficult topics and ones that, again, hindsight were healthy for us to have so that we could process, and if anything did happen, I knew what to expect. But so death has kind of always been around.
Yeah.
That's why you just sent me a Teams chat to join the existential therapist channel.
Yep. That relative there is
I think every newlywed couple should spend their honeymoon planning each other's funerals.
True story. Yeah, it's not fun. Not fun.
Purposeful though.
But purposeful.
Constructive.
Exactly.
Meaningful.
Even going to the family members and saying like, hey, if this happens, I am going to call you. I'm probably only going to be able to say this, and I need you. And they're like, yep, I will drop everything. So that was great, and which they did for our first pregnancy, and it was wonderful. But when we lost the second one, I was expecting to be met with open arms again. and no one was there. They ghosted me. And the reason that I've come to understand is it's taboo.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, if you lose one pregnancy, that's a fluke. Anybody could lose their first pregnancy. Oh, you've lost another one. Now there might be something wrong with you. Now there might be a reason why this isn't happening for you. And they just they weren't there anymore.
I would imagine too, that was really shocking for you since they were so supportive that first time. Were you met with a lot of like the typical advice of like, maybe you should do this differently, or?
Oh, 100%.
Oh, no.
Yeah, 100%. People are telling me that we should have done things differently. People are oh, maybe now is just not the right time. Maybe you should wait. Maybe you should do this. Maybe you should adopt. Maybe you should, all the stuff that you don't necessarily want to hear. And then I had people who were just literally like, I'm going to hang up now.
Wow. Like they can't even
like
say anything.
They couldn't even handle it.
Wow.
So it was a way different experience, and I became a very bitter person after that. For months and months, I had people who were like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" I'm like, "No, I'm not okay. Thanks for asking."
Yeah.
But that would shut them down too. They would kind of lean away because when you're bubbly and happy all the time, you're approachable, and when you're not, nobody wants to be around you.
Yeah. Well, but grief changes you.
Yes. It was very isolating, but it was almost in a way that I kind of reached towards the isolation because I was depressed. And you don't want to converse with people or be around people when you're depressed and wanting to be alone and isolated.
Yeah,
So
isolation is it's very seductive when you're
Yes.
depressed.
Very much so. And then, of course, you have the thoughts of, are we meant to have kids? Is there something wrong with us? Maybe we should go get tested. And fun fact, did you know that they won't look into anything for you unless you have either been trying for a year and not gotten pregnant, period, or if you've had 3 consecutive miscarriages.
Oh, wow.
So
So
until
another-
3, no one was willing to even look in to help us with anything.
So another way that the medical system was invalidating to you, you had that first comment of like, well, you can decide whether or not this was a loss. And then kind of the next of, we can't provide solutions for you yet.
Yep. Keep trying before we'll even look in to see if we can help you or if something's wrong with you.
So how did your partner cope through this second one too? You talked about how you kind of pulled back a little bit. You became more bitter. What did their response look like?
To this day, he kind of still sort of pretends like it didn't happen. He was able to be okay and come to peace with the fact that we'd lost the first one. And the second one, he was like, oh, well, maybe we weren't actually pregnant. Because we'd only known for 2 days before I lost the baby. So for him, he was able to kind of gloss over it and be like, well, it was just another fluke. Man, it didn't happen. Like, yeah, I know it did. It did.
So then how did you cope with all of this?
I don't remember a lot of it, to be honest, because I was that bitter.
Yeah.
I was just an angry person. I was not myself at all for a very long time.
How'd you find your way out?
So I got pregnant again. As terrible as that sounds, we had
That
decided.
sounds terrible about that.
But it was so many people who were like, oh, maybe you should stop trying, or maybe you should, or it was equally as invalidating to hear someone say, oh, you can try again, or maybe you shouldn't stop trying, or maybe you should stop trying.
Let me just interrupt you right here and say, like, if you have someone in your life who is experiencing infant loss or miscarriage or infertility or any of these different things, those are all really good ways to invalidate.
Yes.
And what you should actually be doing is supporting and sitting with them in that grief. What would you recommend for people who, like, what are ways that you wish people had reached out to you or said?
Relieve yourself of the pressure to fix it.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, it's like did you expect somebody to say something that would fix all of that for you and take it away?
Exactly.
You know, it's like, and I feel like that's what people assume that their role needs to be. It's like, if I don't have the solution for them, I better not say anything at all. You know, and it's like, it's that's when you run into the trap of saying things that are not helpful, but you do it in a well-intended way. But if, give people you care about the benefit of the doubt, and if they're wanting you to suggest possible solutions, let them ask you for that.
Oh, yes.
It's like if they don't ask for that, it's like just be with them. Let them know you're there.
Yes, very much.
That's what I would say.
Because that's what helped with the first one. They let me talk about it. They let me cry about it. Some of them cried with me, and it was a very validating experience to know that I was seen, that my pain was seen, and that they acknowledged that that baby mattered.
Yeah.
And then the second one, no one would.
Yeah.
No one would. And so I was alone in my grief for this child. That people were saying, oh, you weren't actually pregnant anyways, or oh, you keep trying, it'll happen. Like, but it didn't, or it did, but then it didn't. And it was a very painful experience, and that's the one that I would not want to relive, because I didn't like how I changed. I didn't like the person that I recognized I was becoming, but I also didn't want to fix it. I didn't want to. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to be. I didn't want to be the happy, bubbly person that everyone had come to expect, because I was like, but I'm pissed. I'm angry. And that goes along with grief too, is the stages of the denial and the bargaining and everything. Like, I was just so angry. I remember having a conversation. My family's very spiritual, and I yelled at God. I did. I'll admit it. And so many people were like, "Oh, don't yell!" Like, no. I have this.
God's okay if you yell. If you yell at God, God'll be fine.
I think there are stories in scriptures that talk about people yelling at God and
it's like a typical
anger
phase of the developmental process of theology.
Yeah.
And I just have a very authentic relationship where I can be like, hey, I can have a conversation with you like I would my dad. I've yelled at my dad. I'll admit to it. Sorry, Dad. But I remember yelling at him and be like, you owe me. You owe me. You know how much I want to be a mom, and you keep taking it away. My husband and I got married in 2010, and ever since then, I had very specifically been praying for twin redheaded girls. And 7 years later, when we start trying and I lose these pregnancies, I was so angry. And I was like, you owe me those twins. Like, you owe me going through all this pain. And going back to your original question of how'd you get through it? We got pregnant again. I went to a new OB because I was not going back to the
and honestly, if you've had that experience with a doctor, I think it.
Physicians don't need second chances.
No.
It's like there are enough of them out there.
Exactly.
Just move on.
But also just how valuable to have somebody that you actually trust that's taking care of you.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And I remember most distinctly about that appointment with this new OB was that she comes into the room. She's like, congratulations, we confirmed you're pregnant. And I was like, oh, okay. She's like, wait a minute. Oh, the paperwork said that you want kid. Like, are you okay with this pregnancy? Is this good news? I was like, no, it's wonderful news, but you have to understand, we've been through this before, and I'm really afraid to hope right now. And she asked about my story, and I told her that, so the only ultrasound I had, losing the pregnancy so early, was the one that I had losing the first one, where they were confirming that there was no child. So the only ultrasound that I had was a non-ultrasound. And so she was like, we're going to fix that for you. We found out at 5 weeks at this point about we thought there was only one. That's fun too. But so I'm pregnant, and so go in about a week and a half later, and she goes, we're going to fix this for you. Usually we wait until 8 weeks for your first ultrasound, because that's just standard procedure. But you're like, I'm going to get you in. We're going to get you in early. We're just going to prove to you that something's there, and then you can hopefully get this hope back. So she made the appointment for me. We go in for this ultrasound, which are always fun that early because you have to do a vaginal ultrasound, and those are uncomfortable. But that part aside, we go in for this appointment, and the tech, I almost said nurse, the ultrasound tech is sitting there, oh
no.
And I'm like,
oh gosh.
Yeah. I'm like, what is happening? Like, you don't, please don't do this. And it felt like they did this for forever. And my husband and I are sitting there nervous as all
Of
hell.
course.
Like, we're like, what does how mean? And we stood up. Well, I didn't stand up, but literally stood up for ourselves and was like, so, hey, we need you to stop what you're doing right now. And we need you to explain what this means, because I don't think that you understand that this has not been successful for us in the past. We need to understand what means. And then she followed up with, I'm sorry. I just need, like, you didn't have any sort of in vitro stuff, right? And we're like, no, why would that make a difference, right? And she's like, well, okay. She turns the screen for us. You see this little bubble here, yeah? That's your baby. And we're, oh, yay, with the tears, happy tears, all the things. And she goes, and you see this other bubble here?
No.
That's your other baby.
Twins. Don't tell me they have red hair.
Did you not know that she has twins?
No.
They do not have red hair, but they are identical girls.
Oh my gosh. That's so cool.
Oh my gosh.
So prayers were answered, and it was literally in that moment that I was like, okay, I believe you. There is nothing else that can happen in this world that would make me doubt you ever again. Like, all right, I'm sold.
And that's why it's okay to yell at God.
And that's why it's okay to yell at God. You might actually get the thing that you're yelling at him for.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh. So in that moment, I mean, you were like 7 weeks along, 6 weeks along?
6.5-ish.
Okay.
Yep.
So were you allowing yourself to feel some excitement at that point? Or were you still kind of in that grief? Where were you?
That's the complicated one. I still felt grief for the other two.
Yeah.
And I felt so crazy hopeful, because also like what kind of a God would give you the answer to your prayers and take that away? But then that was where the fear came in, because he had taken it away before. I had already lost the other two. What was to stop losing these ones? Especially when it was so emotionally charged at being the twins that we desperately desired. And a spontaneous pregnancy, that's kind of rare. I don't know the statistics, but a spontaneous twin pregnancy is pretty rare.
And you don't have twins in your family?
I have, not in my direct line.
Okay.
I have twins on like different cousins and things. My husband, his grandfather and his great uncle are a set of fraternal twins. But it's fraternal twins that are, as far as I understand, fraternal twins are hereditary.
Oh.
Identical twins just
Spontaneous.
happen.
I didn't know that.
Wow.
Wow. So you were still feeling guarded.
Still feeling guarded.
Where do you feel like, did you feel like you were still depressed? Were you anxious? Were you?
Very anxious. I do think it did snap me out of depression at that point in time, because I was like, wow, this is a miracle. There's no way I can be sad about this, right? But then there was the underlying anxiety about like, well, now I have to make sure that I'm doing everything right. Not that I was doing anything wrong the first two pregnancies, but you have all the, well, you got to be taking your prenatals, and you got to be doing this, and you got to be eating healthy, and you can't eat this, and you can't do that, and you can't have sushi and lunch meat and plethora of other things you're not allowed to eat.
I do think that like society often blames women for infant loss and miscarriages and says like, well, if you hadn't have done this, or if you had done this or something. I follow an influencer on Instagram who she and her wife just went through IVF, and they had a miscarriage, and she was very public about it. And the comments that people put in her posts were alarming. Like you know that the world is bad, but oh my word, people were like all over the place saying, well, you put on your Instagram stories that you were exercising last week, or you put on your Instagram stories that you were painting your room. And just, I mean, the amount of blame, I've just never seen that before. And so I do think that I think that women, people who are pregnant and go through miscarriages are going to experience some of those doubts. They're going to experience some of that self-blame, unfortunately, even though it's not, there's no reason.
It's in the air everywhere.
Right. But like to have society then pushing that on you is, it does add to the anxiety of when you're pregnant or, yeah.
Yeah, I actually had a dear friend at the time who's no longer a friend making such comments like, well, it was because you were on birth control for so many years. Like, your body just couldn't hack it. She legitimately told me that this was my fault. And I was like, oh, great.
Sounds like a good person to
talking
cut
you
out.
for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. So then at what point, if at any point, do you think that you felt some relief from some of the anxiety or you said you kind of felt some of the relief from the depression at that point, but what kind of helped during your pregnancy?
Sadly, the morning sickness.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Just a daily reminder that this is real.
Oh,
because
true.
I had no symptoms.
Yeah.
I had lost the other two so early that I had no symptoms at all. Not even queasiness, not even tenderness, anything.
Nausea never felt so good.
Exactly. Oh, and it was bad. I was diagnosed with hyperemesis.
Oh, my gosh.
And like plain water.
Yeah.
And I spewed like Niagara Falls. Between week 9 and 12, I lived off of saltines and watered down Gatorade. Because Gatorade was too syrupy and I'd throw up, and water was not syrupy enough, so I'd throw up. You mix them together and I could trick my body.
Oh,
it
my
was
goodness.
Great. But it, as awful as it was to be in the bathroom so often, every time I went, I was like, thank God. Like, I'm still puking. They're still there.
Interesting. Yeah.
Wow.
So then fast forward to you got your twins. Talk to me a little bit more about kind of where you were at towards the end of your pregnancy and then even just once the twins came.
Yeah. So that was the fun one. We had quite the journey. When we got pregnant, we lived in Hawaii, and it was at that point that I had gotten I officially was diagnosed with the hyperemesis and had gone in for like 3 separate IV treatments in 1 week that my husband put his foot down and said, nope, we're going home. We don't have family out here. We're going back to family. Like, you can't work right now. We need supports. We're going home. So we moved back home to Wisconsin at the time. And I don't know roughly. So that was around 12, 13 weeks pregnant. And then I wasn't showing her anything yet. But we get jobs, so we can get health insurance, thank God. We'd gotten on state insurance because when we moved, we hadn't had, and I think because they're like $1 million babies, so that was another conversation
State
for another
insurance
time.
takes good care of mamas.
It's great. But they, about, how many weeks? 19 weeks. At 19 weeks, my children, we found out they had contracted something called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. Say that 5 times fast. TTTS for short. And what it is it's literally 100% fatal unless you go to the doctor to do something about it. So twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome is something where I had 2 babies, each having their own amniotic sac, but in one placenta. That's considered a monochorionic diamniotic pregnancy. I hope I'm saying that right.
I just don't know what any of this means.
Yeah.
Right.
Like 3 people in the world would know if you didn't say that.
Exactly. Right. So what happened, this whole time going to my new OB at the time, who was absolutely amazing, the monodi twins. I go to, and this is also talking about spirituality and believing everything happens for a reason. You're not supposed to get the gender reveal. Ultrasound until 20 weeks. We had accidentally scheduled mine for 19 weeks, and I remember calling him and saying, should I wait that week? Should we reschedule? He's like, nah. We'll be able to find out if they're boys or girls at 19 weeks. It's fine. And go to this appointment, find out they're girls. We're over the moon. The next day we get a call from the doctor where they're like, well, we noticed some potential complications. And we're like, oh, cool. Because that tech had put our pregnancy down as a mono pregnancy, and that can only mean very few things. So we get called by the nurse. She says, well, could you come in? We're like, I work a full day today. My husband works. We won't
So you were working during this time?
Yes.
Were you working as a therapist?
No.
Okay.
I hadn't even finished school at this point.
Okay.
So I was just doing a desk job, figuring that I needed to keep it easy while, growing 2 humans.
Sure.
And I literally just put my schooling on hold for 2 years because there was no way I could go through all of that emotional turmoil of losing the children and then trying to grow 2 human beings. I waited. So I just had a desk job for Health Partners. Yeah, so for a health insurance company while got pregnant. It was great. But I was working, my husband was working. They said, we need you to come in today. Like, we can't just call out of work on a whim, like, and you guys close by the time we're done. What do you want us to do? She said, the doctor's willing to wait.
Oh,
Jeez.
no.
Oh, that bodes well. Yeah, exactly. So having that, really lots of anxiety there. Go in and he's like, no, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure the ultrasound tech like maybe just didn't see there's a small membrane that you can see. That's the difference between the amniotic sacs, right? So I'm just going to do my own ultrasound real quick. We're going to check it out. No, what happened was that with twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, where they have one placenta, they're sharing a blood supply. And what was happening is that one was getting too much blood and the other one was not getting enough. And it's 100% fatal because obviously the one not getting enough blood, they consider that the donor twin, they're not going to be able to develop without that blood supply. And the other one is getting so much blood that her heart was becoming enlarged and she could suffer a prenatal heart attack and die. So they're like, okay, we're going to send you over to the mother-baby center. We're going to make some calls. I'm going to contact a colleague. We're going to get this taken care of for you. We have to do something or they will die. And it's a very time-sensitive issue because blood supply is a constant flowing thing for developing babies. So he contacted his guy. He's booked out. And he's like, but you know what? I'm on call on Sunday. Have them come in. Like, I'll be at the place. Send them over. Somebody will tell me that they're here when they get here. So we got there like 10 a.m. that Sunday morning. He's like, yep. And he checked everything out. He's like, yes, you not only have the twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, you're at stage 4. Stage 5 is a dead fetus.
Wow.
So he's like, we need to do something. Do you have a place to stay tonight? We want to try to get you on the table at 5:30 the next morning.
So did they have to operate? Is that like the only thing that they could do in this situation?
Yes.
Okay.
It was very non-invasive for me. There's only a certain number of procedures that they can do, but the one they chose for me was they went in, I have a teeny tiny scar in my tummy. They went in with a laser and they cauterized certain strategic blood vessels. All sorts of fun things in the hopes that they could give them each their own blood supply.
Laura. Oh my gosh. I think that, just the amount of stress and anxiety going into this pregnancy and then at this point finding out that you have to go and have surgery. I mean, I think that this is just crazy and so heartbreaking. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And like the fact that that's an option.
Yep.
You know, that we have the capacity to do that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And that's why there's a asterisk after my doctorate.
So then was the surgery successful? How was that?
The surgery was successful. We wouldn't know until they said it was going to take 12 hours. So the biggest stressor with this surgery is that it's very non-invasive for the mom. It's like being invaded by aliens for the children. Yeah. So they said having this surgery will either save your children or it will kill one of them.
Wow.
And so the chances going into that, we were given I'm trying to remember the statistics. We were given a less than 60% chance that one would survive and less than 40% chance that both would survive. And there was a chance that we could kill them both by doing this. But by not doing it, we were choosing to let them die. So it was very, very fun. Lots of fun.
Much pressure on it. That's
long 12 hours.
Oh, it grew even longer because by the 12-hour, the amazing part, and I will never be able to speak highly enough of the Mother Baby Center, because he had contacted his people to schedule. We're going to be here at 5:30 in the morning. They all volunteered to come in that day.
Jeez.
So we were on the table by 2:30 that afternoon.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
And so I can never thank those people enough. So everyone at the Mother Baby Center, huge thank yous that my children are here because of you.
What Mother Baby Center is this?
Minneapolis.
Yeah.
I don't think that the doctor who actually performed the surgery is there, the surgeon. I don't know. I don't think he's actually there anymore. He had a really long last name that started with an S. So if you're listening and you're out there and you have a really long name, started with an S, and you do these kind of surgeries, thank you, because you're the reason my children are still alive today. And you would never know. You would never know. There's lots of risks and lots of different things that can happen when you have twins with twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. One can be born really small compared to the other one, and the other one very large. You would have never known. They were like 2 ounces apart or 3 ounces apart or whatever, and yeah, they were amazing. But that 12-hour wait turned into an 18-hour wait just because the timing was off and the doctor couldn't be in there. And the searching for the heartbeats felt like, I'm sure it was only like maybe 2 minutes max, but man, did it feel like 2 hours. Well, especially when you see, like, they found the first heartbeat and they're like, yay, we found a heartbeat, awesome. And as they're searching for the second one, it did take long enough that the tech's face started to drop.
These techs, man, they need to figure out how to.
It's not the techs, it's their faculty and their training programs. They need to do a better job with mannerisms.
Oh, no kidding.
Keep your huzz to yourself.
No kidding. Learn how to
poker face it up, man, because people are, your lives are on the line.
Especially if you have been through loss before and your heart is almost sometimes expecting that, and so you're looking for something that will confirm that.
Yep, 100%.
Don't give them a reason to confirm that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
While the whole time still praying.
Yeah.
That, like, please, please, please. Like, I know you wouldn't do me dirty, God. Like, come on. Like, come on. They have to find the second heartbeat. And they finally eventually did. And all the tears and all the joy. And it was wonderful. But then, so fast forward to almost time of delivery. So my children were born at 31 weeks gestation. So about 27-ish weeks, I start leaking amniotic fluid. My water didn't burst. They always like, my water broke, da-da-da. But one of them had basically sprung a leak. And so they rushed me to the mother-baby center. And they're like, well, you're going to be on bed rest for hopefully 6 weeks. My children decided 17 days later that they were coming. And so they were extremely early. They had to be intubated immediately. And I thank God that I didn't see, like, the discharge paperwork where they have all the doctor verbiage and stuff on there, what went wrong and what you're paying for and all this stuff. It says infant resuscitation. And man, is that a scary it's a scary thing to see on paperwork.
Well, and I think that just the theme that I'm getting and, like, throughout this story is just how you were kind of left on edge for a lot of this. And so you were experiencing so much anxiety before the pregnancy, during the losses, and then during this pregnancy. And so, gosh, I imagine your blood pressure was like through the roof.
Through the roof all the time. And everyone's, don't be anxious with the baby.
Of
like,
course.
you got to keep even keel for the baby or they're not. So then you always have this constant fear of, am I going to do something wrong? Again, am I going to cause something? Am I just constantly?
Don't be anxious.
Exactly.
So then for client, you need to calm down. So now you're a therapist. So, like, when you are working with parents that have experienced infant loss, that are going through really maybe high-risk pregnancies or just scary pregnancies like what you've been through, what are some ways that you've been able to support clients through kind of their own experiences because of what you've been through?
I ask them what they need. I ask them what they need from me because it's really easy for when you've experienced this and it's really easy to assume what feelings they're feeling. It's really easy to want to, cry with them, give them a big hug, be like, it'll all be okay. Like all the things that was not great to hear from people are the things that immediately want to come out of your mouth. And you're like, no. What do you need from me? Like, do you want to tell more of your story? I'm here to listen. Do you want, like, no one's ever accepted a hug. I don't think I've ever actually legitimately asked if people wanted a hug. But the thought has been there, like asking, like, do you want a hug? Do you want to share your story? Do you want to cry? Do you want supports? Can I set you up or hook you up with Postpartum Supports Minnesota is really big. They're part of Postpartum Supports International, and I cannot talk them up more. They're
such a good organization.
So great. And they even have paternal mental health stuff too, which we can get to later. But that's also near and dear to my heart because so many people forget the dad.
Oh, yeah.
And we talk about that one later. But I am very cognizant of wanting to find out what they need from me, so that I'm not making those assumptions and risk invalidating them. And I will be very authentic about it and let them know, like, because I have experienced this and because there's so much happening right now, I need to know where you're at and what you need.
At one point, so I'm curious too, like, you've navigated this personally. At what point did you feel like you could see clients that have also been through this without kind of bringing your own stuff into it or bringing your own grief into it?
I haven't thought about that one. Because I wasn't finished with school yet, and so I still had to finish school. I still had to do my practicum and internship. And so I'm still, because I'm pre-licensed, I'm not officially in this niche yet like I want to be. These clients have been few and far between, but I want them to be, more like, so if you have issues, come see me.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at too is, like, for some people who have been through tragedies, it's hard for them to also see clients that have been through similar things. And so I think sometimes our like reaction is to try to stay away from some of those clients and be like, I think that will be too hard for me.
Yeah. I embraced it because when, after my children were in the NICU and then to the special care nursery, while they were in the NICU, I had so many people offering support. They're like, do you need to talk to someone? Do you need, like, we're going to check out for postpartum
like
depression.
hospital
people. And at the time I was on cloud 9 because my kids were out, they were alive, they were in the hospital, but they were thriving and it was wonderful. I didn't, depression, what are you talking about? This is the most amazing thing. Fast forward about, they were 3 or 4 weeks old and it hit hard. Like,
that's common for it to be delayed.
Yep. And I think statistically anywhere up to a year is when they really want to make sure that they're still checking in on you. So by the time I needed it and by the time I recognized that I needed to talk to someone, they were off on the new moms. The support wasn't available for me anymore. And so it was like, okay, then I guess I go talk to my OB. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And which he did help, but I had to wait until they were out. So I didn't go see my OB until my one daughter was released at 5 weeks old, and my other daughter had to stay in the special care nursery until she was 7.
That's so hard.
Yep. Because she was the one who'd sprung the leak, and so her lungs hadn't developed as quickly as her sisters, so she had to be on oxygen. And so the one was like, oh, nope, she's good, she can go home. Which, by the way, leaving 5 weeks, or leaving after being in the NICU for 5 weeks prior to, however early they are, the rule of thumb is like however many weeks early they are, expect them to be in the NICU for that long. So they were 9 weeks early. Well, she got out at 5. That's amazing. Amazing.
That is amazing. My daughter was born at 28 weeks gestation. She was still in the NICU for, I think, 11 weeks still. And so it's like, I can't believe that they got to leave so early.
Yeah.
Like 5 weeks?
It's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah. It felt like 11 weeks.
When they're supposed to be cooking for like 9 more weeks, that's crazy. Yeah.
Oh, they were never supposed to get out of the oven. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So them, like, all around miracle babies, most definitely $1 million miracle babies is what we call them.
You must have really yelled at God.
Oh. I think I did.
Yeah, because they were just like, I'm not going through that again.
Yeah.
I'll get you these babies.
No matter what.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you went home with one of your daughters, one of them stayed, and was that kind of when you started to feel postpartum depression? You started to feel...
Just slightly before that.
Okay.
So slightly before that, I was already, that just tagged on the mom guilt on top of it. Because when you take one home and the other one's without you for 2 weeks, and they talk, well, the kangaroo care, and you need to be there, and you need to be breastfeeding them. They weren't even breastfeeding at that point in time because they had the...
Yeah,
not the cannula, because that was the oxygen. The tube in their nose. There, thank you, that word. The feeding tube in their noses for so long that they hadn't really learned how to latch or breastfeed. But they could bottle feed. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent her home. But she bottle fed. We didn't even breastfeed or anything like that. And that affected my mental health, too.
Well, for some parents, that would be a huge loss. Like, the expectations of... Well, first off, the expectations, you know, I mean, you're expecting this type of pregnancy. You're expecting this would happen, this wouldn't happen, and then for everything to be tossed out the window.
Yep.
Well, and just the the roller coaster of emotions that must be happening, where it's like, I'm feeling up here. I'm so anxious about all of these different things. And then suddenly I'm taking them home. Like, what? I mean, it's gotta be.
Yeah.
Because in like a pregnancy where everything goes as planned, the moment where you actually take the baby home, that's terrifying in and of itself. You know, but on the curtails of this entire story, wow.
Yep. And my maternity leave was only 8 weeks long. So by the time we brought both babies home at 7 weeks, I was only home with them for a week before I had to go back to work. And that does stuff to you too. And not to mention, right? And not to mention the fact that my poor husband, we didn't recognize it as postpartum depression at the time, because this whole journey for him, you know, he worked in Wisconsin 2 hours away. So while I'm on bed rest for those 17 days and then we delivered and I stayed in the hospital with them, he was home alone. He would drive, after they were born, this man, he's a rock star. They were born, he would work all night long, drive the 2 hours to the hospital to spend it. He slept for most of it, but to be with us, just to drive the 2 hours back before his shift, he did that for like the first 2 or 3 weeks, man.
Jeremy.
Yes. Rock star.
He's a new hero of mine.
He's an amazing man.
A hero of many forms.
Yes. Yeah.
So then at what point did he recognize that you were struggling? Or did you just recognize it in yourself?
I just recognized because I not usually a depressed person and was feeling all these so postpartum depression, a whole nother topic, period, can come in many forms. And the one thing that I knew that like, oh, if you're starting to feel like you want to kill yourself or harm the babies, yeah, you need to see. I was nowhere near that. But I did recognize, I never cry this much. I'm never so weepy. I'm never so sad. Like I have no reason to be sad, right? These beautiful babies that are alive and thriving, I have no reason to be sad. So go to the doctor.
Oh, Laura, your experience is so normal. It's so normal.
Yes.
And so I appreciate you sharing exactly
and
that.
That's my whole, I appreciate the opportunity to share my story because that's what's important to me, that so many people treat it like it's this, whether it's depression or the miscarriages or anything, it's this taboo topic that you're not supposed to you're not supposed to talk about those things because you have to be worried about how the other people feel. How are you making these people feel? Like, no offense, no one cared about how I felt, or the people who did care about how I felt didn't, the impact wasn't there.
Were you seeing a therapist at all during this period?
Nope, not at all. So let me tell you, it would have been nice. It would have been nice.
I mean, maybe that's like a good takeaway where it's like if you're feeling like you're experiencing some of these symptoms, if you have a high anxiety, high risk pregnancy, if you've gone through some of these miscarriages, infant loss, like it can be so valuable to talk to someone who specializes in this, that can hold space for you in this way.
Yeah.
And you don't have to wait.
No.
Yeah,
it's
please
like,
don't wait.
Establish that relationship, find a good one, and just have them on call.
Agreed. Yeah, it would have been amazing for me. It would have been amazing for my husband. It would have been amazing, and my family's been hit by all sorts of different loss. My brother and his wife had a stillborn and then a miscarriage. My niece had her daughter several years ago. Her daughter was 3 months younger than my children, and she passed away at 4 months old.
Oh my gosh!
And so my family has experienced so much loss and many different. Thus, death being that family member at the party that you don't want to see. Yeah.
So when you're thinking about the people listening to this podcast, they're therapists. They're most likely kind of newer therapists. What sort of tips would you have or advice would you have for people who maybe haven't been through an experience like this and they're wanting to support their clients who are walking through infant loss or miscarriages or high anxiety pregnancies? What sort of advice would you give them?
I think what I would have wanted was someone to be willing to listen and try to understand, even if they had no idea, because I still meet people who do no idea what it's like. And being like, as long as you're willing to listen and try to understand, even if you can't to the capacity at which I understand. But I don't wish that upon anyone. I don't want other people to ever know what it feels like to have gone through all the wonderful stuff we've gone through. But other people are going to. They are going to go through it. And if you don't, and I guess this would be my advice for any mental health, anything that you don't quite grasp, not just maternal mental health, is that is be willing to listen and understand, and be willing to like refer out. True too, if you're like, wow, you need help in this area, I don't have the expertise in this area, let me get you help. Let me help you find the person who has the expertise in this area. And I would also, I suppose, what the other thing that I would have wanted, I think I would have wanted somebody who would have told me, like, I don't know what you're going through. I'm not going to pretend that I understand, but tell me about it, and be willing to be uncomfortable. That's what I was getting at. That if it's making you uncomfortable, maybe assess why it's making you uncomfortable. Because a lot of the societal pressures and expectations and it being a taboo thing is that people get, oh, I don't know if I want to talk about it. Well, why?
We run from discomfort.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if we experience the first glimpse of discomfort, it's like, oh my gosh, drop everything and make this go away.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not helpful.
No.
Don't do that.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt with the second loss that everybody else was like, well, just, I don't want to hear it. Don't talk to me about it. I was like,
and it's easier it's easier choosing isolation over people disappointing you.
Exactly. As long as I isolate myself, I can't get hurt.
Yeah.
What about if you are noticing that, like, I don't know, maybe you're noticing a friend that is possibly struggling with postpartum depression, or like prenatal depression, or, you know, just some of the things that you've experienced. What would you have any advice for them as well? I think, everybody wants to help out with the newborn, right? Everybody is willing to come and help out when they first get home, because they're like, oh, you must need sleep, you need dishes done, you need that. Please keep helping. Yeah. After that honeymoon period, like, they still have a child. That stuff doesn't go away. Please be willing to continue helping until they say, hey, I don't need your help anymore. Because you never know when that might have been the brink, that they were okay while they had help, but now they don't have help, and now they're not okay anymore. So please keep checking in. Please. And sometimes don't be like, what do you need from me? Because a new mom might not be able to tell you. She might not be able to tell you what she needs because she's exhausted. So you can come in and be like, hey, I'm going to make dinner tonight. Or I'm going to come do your dishes quick. Or do you need a shower? I would love to, like, watch the baby. Or I'm going to give you a nap. Yeah. Like, sometimes taking it, because that would hopefully, in my mind, would allow the mom to be like, oh, that sounds wonderful, but what I really need is this. And then do that thing. Well, and you've got to be taking care of your physical health in order to also be taking care of your mental health too. So I think that's so crucial for a new parent.
100%.
And I think in general, just stop looking at delivery as the finish line.
Yep.
You know, that seems to be what happens, not only for the moms who deliver, but for members of their support system too, or their spouses. You know, it's like, great, you did it, we're done. You're not pregnant anymore.
Yep.
Almost as if it's an expectation that you just immediately bounce right back to who you were and where your body was at and how you experienced this world before.
Yeah, well, just like getting married is your happily ever after, right? That's the end of the story.
Maybe the second time.
Thank you so much for joining, Laura, and sharing your story and sharing your experiences and how those can be helping other people that are going through similar things. I really
so
appreciate
cool.
it.
Oh, thanks.
I love this. You're great.
You're
definitely getting in the existential therapist group.
Love it. Love it.
You've passed the test.
And quick note, too, is just that paternal mental health is just as important.
Yeah,
let's have you on. Yeah, we'll have you on and we'll chat.
And Jeremy,
I
want to meet Jeremy.
Right? Yeah, I'll bring him sometime.
I love it. Awesome.
And the girls, because of course.
Oh my gosh, the girls. The miracle babies.
No kidding.
How old are they now?
6.
6.
Amazing.
They were supposed to be born in April, so they should have turned 6 this month. They turned 6 in January.
Oh, that's crazy. You just got them for 4 extra months.
Yep.
Or a couple extra months.
Yep.
Thanks for doing that. You know, it's there's a lot of vulnerability there, but those things are so important. And thus far, the people in our comment section have been pretty nice.
They've been wonderful. Thank you for listening, guys. Yes. We'll see you next week.